Writing, the art of communicating thoughts to the mind through the eye, is the great invention of the world. Great in the astonishing range of analysis and combination, which necessarily underlies the most crude and general conception of it. Great, very great in enabling us to converse with the dead, the absent, and the unborn at all distances of time and space. And great, not only in its direct benefits, but greatest help to all other inventions. Suppose the art, with all conception of it, were this day lost to the world. How long, think you, would it be before even young America could get up the letter A with any adequate notion of using it to advantage? The precise period at which writing was invented is not known, but it certainly was as early as the time of Moses, from which we may safely infer that its inventors were very old fogies. Webster, at the time of writing his dictionary, speaks of the English language as then consisting of 70 or 80,000 words. If so, the language in which the 5 books of Moses were written must, at that time, now 33 or 400 years ago, have consisted of at least 1/4 as many, or 20,000. When we remember that words are sounds merely, we shall conclude that the idea of representing those sounds by marks, so that whoever should at any time after see the marks would understand what sounds they meant, was a bold and ingenious conception not likely to occur to one man of 1,000,000 in the run of 1,000 years. And when it did occur, a distinct mark for each word, giving 20,000 different marks, first to be learned and afterwards remembered, would follow as the second thought, and would present such a difficulty as would lead to the conclusion that the whole thing was impracticable. But the necessity still would exist, and we may readily suppose that the idea was conceived and lost and reproduced and dropped and taken up again and again, until at last the thought of dividing sounds into parts and making a mark not to represent a whole sound, but only a part of one, and then of combining these marks, not very many in number, upon the principles of permutation, so as to represent any and all of the whole 20,000 words, and even any additional number, was somehow conceived and pushed into practice. This was the invention of phonetic writing, as distinguished from the clumsy picture writing of some of the nations. That it was difficult of conception and execution is apparent, as well by the foregoing reflections, as by the fact that so many tribes of men have come down from Adam's time to ours without ever having possessed it. Its utility may be conceived by the reflection that, to it we owe everything which distinguishes us from savages. Take it from us, and the Bible, all history, all science, all government, all commerce, and nearly all social intercourse go with it. The great activity of the tongue in articulating sounds has already been mentioned, and it may be of some passing interest to notice the wonderful powers of the eye in conveying ideas to the mind from writing. Take the same example of the numbers from 1 to 100 written down, and you can run your eye over the list and be assured that every number is in it in about 1/2 the time it would require to pronounce the words with the voice. And not only so, but you can, in the same short time, determine whether every word is spelled correctly, by which it is evident that every separate letter, amounting to 864, has been recognized and reported to the mind within the incredibly short time space of 20 seconds, or 1/3 of a minute. I have already intimated my opinion that in the world's history, certain inventions and discoveries occurred of peculiar value, on account of their great efficiency in facilitating all other inventions and discoveries. Of these were the arts of writing and of printing, the discovery of America, and the introduction of patent laws. The date of the first, as already stated, is unknown, but it certainly was as much as 1,500 years before the Christian era. The second, printing, came in 1436, or nearly 3,000 years after the first. The others followed more rapidly, the discovery of America in 1492, and the first patent laws in 1624. Though not opposite to my present purpose, it is but justice to the fruitfulness of that period to mention two other important events: the Lutheran Reformation in 1517, and still earlier, the invention of Negroes, or of the present mode of using them, in 1434. But to return to the consideration of printing, it is plain that it is but the other half, and in real utility, the better half, of writing, and that both together are but the assistance of speech in the communication of thoughts between a man and a man. When man was possessed of speech alone, the chances of invention, discovery, and improvement were very limited. But by the introduction of each of these, they were greatly multiplied. When writing was invented, any important observation likely to lead to a discovery had at least a chance of being written down, and consequently a better chance of never being forgotten, and of being seen and reflected upon by a much greater number of persons, and thereby the chances of a valuable hint being caught proportionably augmented. By this means, the observation of a single individual might lead to an important invention years or even centuries after he was dead. In one word, by means of writing, the seeds of invention were more permanently preserved and more widely sown, and yet, for the 3,000 years during which printing remained undiscovered after writing was in use, it was only a small portion of the people who could write or read writing, and consequently, the field of invention, though much extended, still continued very limited. At length printing came. It gave 10,000 copies of any written matter, quite as cheaply as then were given before, and consequently 1,000 minds were brought into the field where there was but one before. This was a great gain, and history shows a great change corresponding to it, in point of time. I will venture to consider it the true termination of that period called the Dark Ages. Discoveries, inventions, and improvements followed rapidly, and have been increasing their rapidity ever since. The effects could not come all at once. It required time to bring them out, and they are still coming. The capacity to read could not be multiplied as fast as the means of reading. Spelling books just began to go into the hands of the children, but the teachers were not very numerous or very competent, so that it is safe to infer they did not advance so speedily as they do nowadays. It is very probable, almost certain, that the great mass of men at that time were utterly unconscious that their conditions or their minds were capable of improvement. They not only looked upon the educated few as superior beings, but they supposed themselves to be naturally incapable of rising to equality. To emancipate the mind from this false and underestimate of itself is the great task which printing came into the world to perform. It is difficult for us now and here to conceive how strong this slavery of the mind was, and how long it did, of necessity, take to break its shackles, and to get a habit of freedom of thought established. It is in this connection a curious fact that a new country is most favorable, almost necessary, to the emancipation of thought and the consequent advancement of civilization and the arts. The human family originated, as is thought, somewhere in Asia, and have worked their way principally westward. Just now, in civilization and the arts, the people of Asia are entirely behind those of Europe. Those of the east of Europe behind those of the west of it, while we, here in America, think we discover and invent and improve faster than any of them. They may think this is arrogance, but they cannot deny that Russia has called on us to show her how to build steamboats and railroads, while in the older parts of Asia, they scarcely know that such things as SBs and RRs exist. In anciently inhabited countries, the dust of ages, a real downright old foggyism, seems to settle upon and smother the intellects and energies of man. It is in this view that I have mentioned the discovery of America as an event greatly favoring and facilitating useful discoveries and inventions. Next came the patent laws. These began in England in 1624, and in this country with the adoption of our Constitution. Before these, any man might instantly use what another had invented, so that the inventor had no special advantage from his own invention. The patent system changed this, secured to the inventor for a limited time the exclusive use of his invention, and thereby added the fuel of interest to the fire of genius in the discovery and production of new and useful things.